Hello everyone, welcome to the Sad Crime Channel. In today's episode, I would like to tell you about a tragedy that took place in 2011 in the United States. In today's episode, we will move to the town of Buena Vista in the state of Michigan, where 32-year-old Jennifer Webb lived. She worked in customer service at a company selling tools, and it seemed like the perfect job for her. She was very cheerful, always smiling, and loved talking to other people. Jennifer was a huge football fan. Whenever she could, she attended matches supporting her favorite Michigan team. The year 2011 was a turning point for her. Jennifer was expecting her first child. She wasn't in a relationship with anyone, but she felt that her biological clock was ticking faster and knew that if she didn't decide to have children now, she might never have them. She announced the joyful news to her family when she was already 5 months pregnant. Jennifer didn't announce her pregnancy earlier, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know. Just then, during a visit to the doctor, she learned that she would soon become a mother. Jennifer was exceptionally happy about it. Her parents were also delighted to become grandparents, especially since they saw how excited their daughter was. However, they were very surprised by this fact because they realized that Jennifer wasn't in a relationship with anyone. She then told them about the father of her child. He was a man she had known for 10 years. They were good friends. However, they couldn't be together because this man already had his own family, a wife and a child. Things weren't going well in his marriage, and he was separated from his wife. But Jennifer didn't really demand much from him. She didn't pressure him to leave his wife for her. She just wanted him to be the father of her child. She didn't have feelings for him, so she didn't care about being in a relationship with this man. She knew she could handle raising her son on her own, for whom she had already chosen a name, Braxton. For Jennifer, it was the best time of her life. She was happier than ever before. She even bought a new house to start a new chapter in her life when Braxton was born. Everything was going perfectly until the moment someone broke into her house while she was away. Only the television was stolen at that time, but shortly after that incident, the situation repeated itself. Someone broke into Jennifer's house again, which made the woman feel insecure. She decided she needed to equip her house with an alarm system, but until then, she would move in with her parents, where she would feel safer. She knew she would spend some time there, and since the due date was approaching, she set up a room for her son in one of the rooms. On August 30th, 2011, the 32-year-old went to her friend Andrea, whom she had been helping with her newly born twins. On the one hand, she could help her friend, on the other hand, prepare for her new role in life, which was about to happen soon, on September 23rd. Around 8 p.m., Jennifer started saying goodbye to Andrea. In the evening, she had a planned meeting with the father of her child, with whom she wanted to discuss a few formal matters, including adding his name to the birth certificate. The friends said goodbye and agreed to meet the next day. But Andrea didn't know that she saw Jennifer and talked to her for the last time that evening. In the late evening hours, 2 policemen on duty found the woman's body next to her car, parked in a secluded place. Everything indicated that the woman had taken her own life. A cable was tied to the trunk located on the car's roof, with its other end wrapped around the woman's neck. Neither of them knew her. The policeman who was first at the scene of the incident took out the victim's bag from the car. On top of it, he found a note, which, when unfolded, turned out to be a farewell letter. Both officers began to read it and could learn from it that she was not as happy as everyone who knew her thought. That ever-present smile on her face was just a mask. In reality, Jennifer believed she had ruined her life. An unwanted pregnancy, resulting from a one-time encounter with a man she met at a bar, only reinforced her belief that her life was a string of failures. She didn't even know who the father of her child was. She only knew his name, Chris, if he introduced himself by his real name. The policemen were shocked. It's not often that a woman in such an advanced pregnancy decides on such a step. In her bag, besides the letter, they also found her wallet, and when one of the policemen looked at the document with her photo, he realized he knew her. He had seen her several times in the bar. There was no evidence of third-party involvement, so after taking photos of the scene, the woman's body was taken to the morgue and her car was towed away. When Jennifer's family was informed of her death, they couldn't believe it. Her mother immediately told the police that if her daughter was not alive, then it definitely wasn't suicide. She knows her child well, and there's no way she would want to take her own life. Even the farewell letter, which the police showed Jennifer's mother, raised doubts for her. Prepared earlier, printed from a computer and using vocabulary completely unlike Jennifer's. She was so sure her daughter didn't write it that she barely read a fragment of it. She was convinced that if Jennifer ever thought about saying goodbye to this world, she would write letters to each person separately, and those letters would be handwritten with colorful, glittery pens. There was no way her daughter would write such a soulless letter. Jennifer's parents also showed the police the room their daughter had set up for Braxton. Does this look like the behavior of someone who wants to take their own life? The police understood the bitterness and despair of Jennifer's parents, but they had to ask them about the details of their daughter's life, and that's when they learned something that shed a completely different light on the matter. When they asked about the man Jennifer was expecting a child with, her mother gave the man's name without hesitation. It was one of the subordinates of the sergeant talking to her, Officer Kenneth Blue. But why did mentioning this particular name make Sergeant Waterman turn pale as a wall? Officer Blue was the one who found the woman's body, the one who found the farewell letter and Jennifer's wallet. How could he not recognize her when he was the father of her unborn child? All of this seemed very suspicious, and because one of the officers was involved in the case, the local police couldn't handle it, and the case was taken over by the state police. They didn't have an easy start because, as I mentioned earlier, the body was taken to the morgue. The car was towed away from the scene. Presumably, many traces were destroyed. But nobody said every case had to be easy, so the investigators quickly got to work. The first thing they did was to check the place where the woman was found again. It was a secluded place, near the police shooting range. Officer Blue liked to come to this place when he wanted to take a nap during duty. He knew about it well, accompanied that evening by Officer Patterson, who, unable to reach him for about an hour and a half, began to search the area for him. It was the first place he went to, and bingo. Blue was there, but he wasn't sleeping as Patterson expected. He just walked up to his car and informed his colleague that he found the body. Patterson noticed that Kenneth was sweaty, breathing quickly, and his uniform was slightly disheveled. Checking the scene, the state police found a couple of flip-flops about 200 meters away from the place where the car was parked. They didn't have to belong to Jennifer, but they made them aware that the area needed to be thoroughly searched. And a little further, they found something that could be related to the case. In close proximity to each other lay a cigarette butt and a pendant, and right next to them was a blood stain. The cigarette butt was secured, a blood sample found on the sidewalk was taken, and the pendant was shown to the family, who confirmed that Jennifer had exactly the same one. Officer Blue was interrogated. He hadn't been charged yet because the investigation was ongoing. The investigators wanted to hear his version of events. He insisted on his original version. He was patrolling the area, and then he noticed a car parked by the ditch. When he approached closer, he noticed a woman lying next to the car, and when he approached the car, he immediately realized that she was dead. He didn't check her breathing or pulse because he saw that her lips were purple, and her chest wasn't rising. She looked dead. He didn't recognize her immediately when he found her, or when Officer Patterson arrived, and together they tried to figure out who the found woman was. According to Kenneth, he might not have recognized her for two reasons. Firstly, when he found her, he started to act, as he called it, in police mode. He was more concerned about what he should do than about the victim's identity. The second reason, according to him, was Jennifer's hair. Whenever they saw each other, she had her hair done, and when her body was found, her hair was messy. A little strange explanations, but apparently nothing more logical came to his mind. During this interrogation, he assured that there was nothing connecting him to the victim, and that there was no way he could be the father of her child. Their relationship was purely friendly. Only when he learned that Jennifer had given his name to her parents and friend as Braxton's father, He was very surprised and changed his testimony. He admitted that their relationship was more intimate. They met once or twice a month. Confirmation of this was the call log from Jennifer's phone. She had called Kenneth's number several times, the last time on the day of her death. Her phone had Kenneth's number saved as Ken Cop Boo, which also indicated the intimate nature of their relationship. Kenneth agreed to provide DNA samples, and soon it was established that his DNA was found on the cigarette butt spotted near the location where Jennifer's body was found. Of course, this could be explained by the fact that he had previously been in that area, as described by his colleague, when he wanted to nap during duty. The cigarette butt was only a few centimeters away from the bloodstain, which, upon examination, turned out to be Jennifer's blood, along with her necklace, which was her property. No one had any doubts that Jennifer did not take her own life, especially since the autopsy results only confirmed this theory. The cause of her death was strangulation, specifically from behind, a chokehold. The assailant stood behind her and, by clasping his hand around her neck, cut off her air supply. This grip is used by police officers, and among the officers from Saginaw there was one trained officer who trained the others. That officer was Kenneth Blue. He knew well how to properly execute this grip, and additionally there were instructions on how to do it step by step in his car. The autopsy also showed that the loop around Jennifer's neck was tightened after her death, and there were many bruises on her body. Experts also believed that, considering the position she was in when she was found, there was no way she could have taken her own life in that way. More and more evidence pointed to Jennifer's lover being involved in her death. But perhaps the most crucial evidence were Kenneth's fingerprints. 14 fingerprints were found on Jennifer's alleged farewell letter. 14 of his fingerprints and not one belonging to Jennifer. Of course, Officer Blue found this letter and could have left his prints on it. But the strongest evidence here was the imprint of one of his fingers. When Kenneth was interrogated just 9 hours after Jennifer's body was found, his fingerprints were taken at that time. And the impression of the index finger was incomplete because there was a small wound there. The one found on the farewell letter was in perfect condition, which suggested that the letter had been prepared earlier, before the man injured himself. Additional evidence supporting this theory was finding a piece of rubber glove on Jennifer's clothes, specifically the tip of one of the fingers. Blood was found on the inner side of this piece, which, upon examination, turned out to belong to Kenneth, while on the outer side, blood and saliva were found. The saliva belonged to Jennifer, while the blood was a mixture of Jennifer and Kenneth's blood. The theory of the investigators was that during the scuffle, Jennifer bit Kenneth's finger, biting off a piece of the glove and causing a wound on that finger. Pontiac, owned by Jennifer, was checked, and many traces of Kenneth's blood were found inside the car, on the trunk to which a cable was attached, and on the cable itself. His fingerprints were also found, including the index finger, which was already injured at that time. Kenneth, of course, immediately explained where the wound on his finger came from, as well as several others on his body that day. That day he played with his dog, who accidentally scratched him. But before Officer Blue went out to patrol the area, one of his colleagues had lunch with him. They sat at the same table, eating pizza, and at that time, there were no scratches or wounds on Kenneth's face or hands. More and more evidence was stacking up against him. Another piece of evidence was the police uniform he wore that day. He was asked to provide the uniform for examination. Kenneth brought it without hesitation, but it was immediately apparent that it wasn't the one they asked for. It was in perfect condition, washed without creases. The uniform he wore on August 30th was found in his car, hidden under the seat. There were many bloodstains on the pants, Kenneth's blood. All these pieces of evidence together allowed the investigators to establish the most likely version of events. Jennifer and Kenneth were supposed to meet at 9 p.m. in the place where they had met before. It was then, precisely at 9:05 p.m., that the policeman stopped responding to his colleagues' calls. They were talking at the spot where the cigarette butt, pendant, and bloodstain were found. It was there that Kenneth clasped his arm around Jennifer's neck, causing her nose to bleed. When the woman was already dead, he took her to her car, placed the body on the rear seat, and drove a few hundred meters away, where he staged the suicide. He had been preparing for this earlier. Many searches related to ways to take one's life were found on his personal laptop. He wanted to do it in the least painful way possible. He had to be very sure that he wouldn't be linked to Jennifer's death. How else to explain the fact that he was searching for such topics on his private laptop? The investigators had enough evidence against Kenneth. He was arrested on September 12, 2011, and charged with 4 counts, including first-degree murder. The trial began in 2012 and lasted only 3 weeks. On the last day, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kenneth Blue guilty, and the man was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he received a sentence of 65 to 100 years in prison for causing the death of an unborn child. Kenneth's defenders filed an appeal, and in 2014, the sentence for causing Braxton's death was reduced to 18.5 to 40 years. The sentence for Jennifer's murder remained unchanged. Officer Blue will remain in prison for the rest of his days. Maybe you're interested in what his wife, Lisa Blue, did. Very little is known about Ken's wife. We only knew that she filed for divorce from Kenneth in October 2011.
An evil monster is the only words that I can think of for you. So go to your cage and think about how you squeezed the life and breath out of my daughter and grandson. And I hope it haunts you every day for the rest of your life.
Thank you for listening until the end. Goodbye. Take care.